Welcome from the Odyssey of the Seas, Royal Caribbean's newest and one of its most exclusive cruise ships. You finally convinced yourself that it's time to take that cruise, to invest your hard-earned money and vacation time, and you want to get the most out of your experience, so you're here for all that detailed information. I welcome you. You're in the right place. It's the 7th day of our 7-day cruise of the Caribbean. New Year's Eve last night, lost my voice celebrating, and I'm here with my 15-month-old baby, so if you're traveling with kids especially, this review is going to be very useful for you. Stay tuned as we climb from the dock to the deck, 16 floors above. I'll take you around every floor, give you all the little nitty-gritty details that you need really to make the most out of your vacation, especially now traveling in times of the Omicron variant, something that has already derailed our itinerary a little bit. So thank you for being here. Let's do this. Zdravo I dobrodošli, bon dia, bem-vindos, servus, willkommen, buenos dias, bienvenidos, greetings travelers. Nick here from Pegasus Sidecar Tours. Before we get any further than this, your time is very valuable, so why should you listen to me and watch my review? Who am I? Well, I am a proprietor and guide of my own tour company. I've been a tour guide for 15 years, starting in Munich, Germany with Sandman's New Europe. You've probably taken their tours when you're there. They're the largest there. And then in Rio as well, in Brazil. And now I provide guided narrated tours in San Diego County on a motorcycle with a sidecar. Very beautiful, unique experience. If you're ever there, check us out. It's by far the best way to see the place. So I've been doing this for about 15 years now, and I decided to review this ship. Although my channel is mostly devoted to motorcycling, motorcycle adventure touring, this definitely is an adventure. And in any case, our company motto is we produce Odysseys. So I could not pass the opportunity to review this amazing piece of engineering. I mean, you can skydive and surf and then go down, play a game of Texas Hold'em, and then bid on a Thomas Kincaid all before dinner. It's just an amazing city on the sea. So welcome, you're in the right place. I'm here with my 15-month-old, so if you're looking for all that in-depth information of how to make the most out of your trip, especially in times of the Omicron variant, then you're in the right place. Let's go all the way from the dock. I'll take you from every corner of the ship, climbing up the 16 stories to the deck upstairs. And I'm hoping that out of this, you'll have everything you need to make the most of your trip. So this is the Odyssey of the Seas, a little bit about the ship itself. This is in the Quantum Plus class, which is the second highest, second largest class. Next to us, we have the Oasis, which is in the Oasis class. And then below the Quantum Plus is the Quantum, and then Freedom, plus many, many more below it. But this really has everything you need to make the most out of your 7-day vacation, even if you end up staying mostly on the seas, such as what happened with us after an outbreak of COVID with the crew below, forced us to not dock in certain places that wouldn't let us dock. So it has definitely affected our itinerary, but it doesn't matter. There's just so many things to do on the ship. I'm a biker and a very active individual, and my wife is a makeup artist, and she enjoys different things than I do. So between the three of us and our very active 15-month-old, we've taken advantage of every opportunity on the ship. And like I said, it's already day 7, so we've gotten to know the ship very well. I'm the type that actually goes in the night and explores all the unlocked doors. That's what I like to do. And the ships are always been my passion. My father's a sailor, and ever since I was little, I've been familiar with boats, and I can really appreciate this piece of engineering. So let's begin with the very bottom and the embarkation day. Now, the way this video is organized, you'll see tick marks in the progress bar, and they are related to particular sections, particular topics, which are listed in the description. Your time is valuable, so if you'd like to hear more about a specific section, you can skip to that section. Refer to the listed titles in the description below. Let's begin. So this is the newest ship in the Royal Caribbean lineup, 2021, made in Germany. It's been on the water for about 4 months now, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, there's not a speck of rust on this thing. Everything is new, shiny, bright. I enjoy the little details as a man who works with his hands. For example, the grout between the tiles or the caulking around the sink, and I view that and how carefully that was done, and I can enjoy and I appreciate the effort that went into the ship and the little details as well. Every chance they get, they clean it. And with COVID, of course, there's more cleaning procedures that are more regular and more intense. So we'll talk about that in the COVID section, but let's begin with boarding. So the boarding started on Dock 18 of Fort Lauderdale. Again, it's a 7-day cruise around the Caribbean. Our itinerary has been completely changed due to an outbreak of COVID among the crew. So far, it hasn't affected the passengers, basically because we don't know. We're not getting tested like the crew. The crew now gets tested multiple times a week. And day number 2, we were notified by the captain that there's an outbreak, and they removed those 20-some individuals off the boat. They put them in another Royal Caribbean boat that's just cruising for those purposes. Now, if you're here, you're watching this review because you might be traveling with kids. I'm going to assume that being in Florida, you probably visited Disneyland as well, or Disney World, as we did. So here's a little bit of information you want to know before coming to your prearranged boarding time that you need to be there and not late for, because the ship leaves at 5 o'clock sharp. We were there at 3:30, and what I had to do is return our vehicle rented from Orlando into the Fort Lauderdale airport, which is directly across the highway. So not far at all, and we didn't have traffic. That's another factor to consider. But it took me about 20 minutes to drop off my family and the luggage. They did all the check-in, and I returned the car at the rental car place in the airport and ran down to the Uber and the taxi, actually got a cab, and drove back to Dock 18, and that took 20 minutes. But that was very stressful running the whole time. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's doable. And I was there just in time for our cutoff at 3:30. At the boarding, it was very organized. There's not a lot of people at all. That's how it was designed. You get your card with your name and some other information. Unfortunately, it also has the room number, so if you lose it, anybody can get into your room. But you get your picture taken because they do everything with biometrics, and you have to agree to that. And then you board on level number 4, which is the promenade, basically, where all the stores are, some of the restaurants, and the part that looks like a mall, basically. And then you join with your team leader in the predetermined area that you would join in cases of emergency. For us, it was in front of the theater, so we're, A2 is our section name, and it was just us and another family, and they explained the safety procedures, what happens if you hear the alarm, where you meet, and how to do things. I don't know, it wasn't very detailed, to be honest, so make sure you go over that yourself on the TV. I think channel number 2 has the safety information review again for your comfort. Make sure you get familiar with that. The last thing you want is to be panicked because you don't know what to do. So after that section, you have the rest of the day to wait for your luggage, basically. It's a very good idea to have a hand luggage ready with your day's worth of clothes and your swimsuits so that you can actually make use of the ship while your luggage comes to your room, which can take up to 9 p.m. sometimes. So that's always a good idea. You'll receive a bag, Royal Caribbean bag, for some of those basic items for the first day and for the last day. They'll take your luggage before in the morning, the day of departure, and it's the same procedure. You want to have some change of clothing before your luggage actually arrives to you. So that's how you make that part smooth. Just make sure you have clothing enough for the day. If you come earlier, and if your assigned boarding time is much earlier in the morning, there's plenty of things to do to take advantage of the ship, actually. What I recommend you do immediately when it becomes available, download the Royal Caribbean app and make sure you start booking all the events and all the activities and amenities that are available, because those are going to go very, very quickly, especially the more popular ones like the skydiving deck, for example, and the North Star, which is unique to this ship. So Royal Caribbean International is the application with the crown as the logo. Download that and log yourself in and make sure you start reserving. So we are at 50% capacity on the ship because of all the COVID restrictions, meaning 1,500 crew and 2,700 passengers. So at full capacity, this thing can be well over 7,000 people. So yeah, it's definitely in your interest to book those things early. So from then on, your luggage arrives and you go to dinner, day number 1. Day number 2 is typically Coco K. It's their private island a very, very small island. And it's honestly, it looks like a water park, mostly for kids. There's a few beaches, but they're all very controlled, very manicured, very tame experience. Most of it is just poolside. There's a zip line, 1,600 feet, divided in 3 parts. Overpriced in my opinion, about $100. But wait for that and book that when you're already on island, because the price will drop towards the end of the day. And you're there until about 3 p.m. where everybody starts boarding back up. So it's just a day mostly for kids, honestly. The beach itself, I like to scuba dive and snorkel, and there's not much to see. And again, you're restricted how far you can go. Other than that, it's mostly just hanging out by the pool. The girls get their hair braided and that kind of thing, the little shops that are there. But although that's operated by the crew that lives on the little island, it's just not all that interesting, to be honest. I mean, there's a tall water slide and all that, but again, wait to book any of that until you're on the island, because the price is going to drop significantly, sometimes like 60%, because they just want to make the most what they can out of that day. So the zip line is kind of boring if you've done any other zip lines before, so I definitely wouldn't pay $100 for that, but up to you. So after a perfect day at Coco K, that's their slogan, we were supposed to be at sea for one day and then go to St. Thomas Island and then be at sea, and then go to Puerto Rico, San Juan, and then be at sea again and come to Bahamas, which we are right now. That middle part of our itinerary has been derailed because COVID hit. Well, COVID has always been here, but I think because the crew gets tested twice a week, I believe now, they found 20-some individuals to be positive, although asymptomatic with COVID. So they removed them in the morning to another ship, removed them from the sea. Now, at some point, if it hits over 1.5% of the total number of individuals to have COVID, then we just have to turn around. I assume that's what happens, but in any case, the St. Thomas and the Puerto Rico dock did not allow us to come in, so that part has been changed. But again, I argue that you're not really here so that you can get to know San Juan, Puerto Rico, because how much can you actually get to know in a very controlled type of touring in a few hours? Controlled type of touring, what I'm referring to is that in order to actually leave with children who are not vaccinated, they're considered unvaccinated guests, you have to take one of their prearranged tours, and this is not always great, to be honest. In Dominican Republic, which was the substitute for St. Thomas and San Juan, the tour that was provided was on a bus around the little town. You sit on a bus and then they take you around town, but it's only in English. They didn't want to speak Spanish, so if you don't speak English or anybody in your crew doesn't, then they're not going to get anything out of it. So it was largely a waste of time, to be honest. You could just enjoy the ship more. That's what I mean by tamed and controlled. It's not the ideal way that I like to travel. I like to have my freedom to go out and do my thing, come back in time, but you still don't have a lot of time to do that. So keep that in mind. Unvaccinated children also include babies. So under 2 years old, I have a 15-month-old, and we can't do anything on our own outside the ship. We have to book it in advance with one of their prearranged tour guides. So something to keep in mind. So when you climb the ship, starting from floor number 2 is basically port side, and that's where the medical center is midship. Other than that, nothing interesting for travelers down there. Number 3 is where the casino is and the music hall, where sometimes trivias take place and artists come out and do comedy works, etc. It's just a bar, basically. There's also billiards tables on the floor above connected to it as well, floor number 4. On number 4 is the Esplanade, and that is just a collection of shops, a few restaurants, and where the Christmas tree was, and basically where you come in for the first time. That's the first sight you have of the interior of the ship. That's also where the main dining hall is, and of course there's 2 sets of elevators. The one in the aft, the rear part of the ship, have a beautiful metal sculpture that helps you get oriented as well, so keep that in mind. The elevators towards the front of the ship, they're fewer and they're not grand, they're just basic elevators. So on the 4th floor as well is the Royal Theater, something you might want to consider taking advantage of for the movies and the live shows that they have going on every night. On deck number 5 is more of the same shopping services for the customers. You can book activities there as well. There's an office for that. You can book future tours. There's an office for that as well. A lot of watch shops, jewelry shops, all that typical kind of thing that you would find on an exclusive cruise ship. Deck number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They're mostly rooms, basically. Staterooms. On deck number 7, there are those exclusive staterooms as well towards the rear. On number 11 and 12 as well, you'll find the child care center, also for older kids. For babies, it's a specific room that has to be reserved, and it costs about $6 an hour. After 6 p.m., it costs $8 an hour for them to take care of your child while you're out and about. For older children, older than toddlers, you don't have to reserve. It's first come, first serve. Nap time is available. They're allowed to feed the baby if you ask them to. So it's quite helpful to have that. On the top decks, starting with number 14, is you start to get on the deck itself outside. There are a few pools. They're divided by the middle bar and the North Star. It's the ball that you get in, and it rotates around the ship, and you get to see the ship from about 300 feet or above, 100 meters up in the air. It's quite impressive, to be honest. So towards the rear of the ship, you'll find the rock climbing wall, the surf, the flow rider, the mock surfing equipment, and the, how do you call those? The little jumping, you put the VR set and you jump on the trampoline. So it's kind of an interesting experience, largely for kids, to be honest, but by all means do take advantage and experience it. I saw an adult there just having the blast, time of his life, screaming into the VR set. So it's pretty interesting to watch. So if you go around towards the front of the ship, you're going to notice that there is people everywhere. I mean, even at 50% capacity, the ship is just full. On a day at the high seas where everybody's on the ship enjoying the pool, you'll notice that every chair is taken. So keep that in mind. That's, I guess, one of the benefits of traveling during the times of COVID, is that the ship is 50% at capacity. So less people, meaning that you can enjoy the ship a little more. I don't know if I would consider coming here now knowing what it looks like at 50%, if I would come here during regular times where there's twice as many people on the ship, plus more crew. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting factor, a little benefit of all this craziness with COVID. The child pool is divided in two, one for toddlers, which isn't really a pool, it's basically like a puddle. They can hardly get wet in there. It's for toddlers who have a diaper. The other next to it is for kids that are potty trained, and you'll see a lifeguard's always on duty, and there's little slides that they could utilize and whatnot. So, but they'll need to be fully potty trained to utilize that particular pool. The only thing that I don't like about the kiddie pool, aside from it being very small, you can't really dip your child in. My baby really likes to be submerged, up to her torso. She loves to kind of kick around and whatnot. Is that it closes very early at 5 o'clock. It closes, they put a net over the entrance. And the other thing is that sometimes they play very loud music there on that whole part of the dock, that whole side of the floor, and it's just kind of hard to hear. You almost have to yell over each other. So I think they should have put the music on the other side where the adults tend to hang out. Let's talk about the room itself. So we have the state room that has a terrace. So it's looking outside, port side, on the 9th floor. Everything is really nice. There's a lot of storage space underneath the bed, above the bed, in the closets itself. The closets are slow to shut. They don't slam. Everything is new and beautiful and fits right. I really appreciate the build quality of the room. The carpet is clean. Of course, it's a brand new ship. There has been some noise from the neighbors who were arguing with one another, so much so that somebody had called in the security to check in on them. And even when the security came, you could hear through the door, word for word, what the security was saying to these people. So that part, I mean, unless you have very loud neighbors, you'll sleep very well. With a baby who might be roaming around the room, there's not a lot of opportunities for her to get hurt, although she did trip twice, once over the threshold of the bathroom and once over the threshold for the balcony. The balcony is safe. I mean, she's not able to hurt herself that way. And if you happen to book a room next door through the balcony, you can access that room by having the crew open up a little access port, a little access door on the balcony side. So that's kind of nice as well, a little smart detailed. You do get a fridge in the room. You get a mirror that's big and lit, and there's lighting to the terrace from inside the room itself. You do get a very good curtain if you enjoy perfect darkness, but they don't provide with any kind of privacy curtain. So if you ever dock next to another big ship, you're basically staring at each other's rooms if you don't want to pull the curtains, which I don't like to do. I'm here to view the ocean and I like the sun, so I don't like the fact that I have to basically pull the curtain because somebody else is staring in my room. So a little privacy curtain would have been appreciated, because it's been twice now that we've docked next to a bigger ship and rooms are staring directly at one another. There's no headboard, so it's just basically a padded piece of wall. So that's kind of nice, because my baby loves to run around in the bed and climb and walk on the bed actually, and she falls back sometimes and bumps her head, but it's very soft, so I appreciate that as well. Obviously you get a phone. The phone has a USB port charger, which is useful, and there's plenty of charging opportunities in general in the bathroom for your shaver, etc. Yeah, it's just very clean, very, very bright and quiet and beautifully done in blue tone, kind of relaxing blue tone. The shower itself is spacious enough for the three of us and our needs, along with the diaper bag, the stroller. When we checked in, there was already a sanitized, folded crib in place, which is kind of nice to be able to use. It doesn't have a mattress, so I just lay down two big pillows. The pillows are kind of puffy, a little too puffy for my taste, but I lay down two of those pillows and I put them inside the crib for the baby, and she has been enjoying it basically. She sleeps very well in the ship. The ship doesn't really move a lot. I mean, we have nothing but good weather, but you can't really hear it unless you open the door to the outside. Or you unhatch it. There's a way to unhatch it. Basically, it just kind of releases the locking mechanism, so you can definitely hear it then. But there's also a child lock on top of the door. Kids can't access, so that's kind of nice as well to have for bigger kids. My baby does not open doors quite yet. We've also had a bird spend the night on the balcony. A little bird, probably a stowaway basically, because a bird's so little that I can't imagine she can fly across from island to island. So she was there entertaining us for a while. We enjoyed her company. The couch itself turns into a sleeper, also very nice. We only used it the first night. Because of the pillows that I put in the crib, I was worried that the baby might maybe try to climb out. So if she did do that, ended up falling over, she would have fallen on a bed, so it wasn't a big deal. The folks from the room service have been awesome. They come twice a day to clean the room when you're at dinner and once when you're at breakfast. And they've just been super nice. They always leave some kind of a towel art on the bed, and the baby really loves that. When she comes, she's almost now expecting to see and be entertained. The hallways basically for the staterooms, they all look very much the same. It's kind of hard to get oriented if you were placed all of a sudden in one part of the hallway on any particular floor. It looks almost exactly the same as the others. The only way you can get oriented is by the pictures on the wall. The art is very tasteful, I gotta say. It's very unique, very different. Every piece of art or painting or picture on the wall is different, but it doesn't look like cheap art from a hotel or from those very made to specifically be Airbnbs. You encounter art from, same art basically from Marshall's or Ross or something to that effect. If you've been in enough Airbnbs, you know what I'm talking about. It's not that kind of art. The art is actually quite impressive. I mean, you could spend a whole afternoon just walking the halls and really enjoying the art that's on the wall. I appreciate that very much. And in fact, this particular ship has had an art auction, including pieces from Thomas Kincaid, so more well-known names even for those who are not involved in bidding for art. Regarding the prices in the stores, I've been actually impressed that they're not abusive. We purchased 2 watches while we've been here, one more expensive and one more basic. And on both, you save around 25% from prices that you would normally be able to get them for on land. Now, of course, if you're from another country where these more luxurious items typically don't have any kind of discounts anyways, then you'll definitely benefit from buying on the ship. And there's no tail sales tax, and there's typically discounts. So for example, my Citizen watch was at a 35% discount, no sales tax, and it still came out to be about 25% cheaper than you would get it for on land. We also bought a Breitling watch that was significantly more expensive, and it also ended up saving about $1,000 on that one. So towards the rear, where the rock climbing wall is and the flow rider, which I've made significant use of and luckily improved throughout my stay here on, you also sometimes tend to notice a lot of the smoke from the chimneys, and they actually release little droplets of black motor oil that's obviously not healthy to have on your skin, but it's also damaging to your clothing. It can't be washed off. So. Food. I'm not the type that likes to take photos of my plate and that kind of thing, so you're not going to see that too much here, but the food was excellent. I gotta say, the food was not disappointing at all. Even the dinner, the lunch, the breakfast, everything that's available in between, everything is good. Good quality food, plenty of it, and enough to satisfy anybody. It's hard not to gain weight on things like this. The way it's organized is, I believe the place is called Windjammer, and this is towards the rear of the boat. It's got beautiful views. It's a big lunch and breakfast place. So in the morning we would go have breakfast there. It's a buffet. Everything you could possibly imagine, and all your dietary restrictions can be satisfied there. And I suggest you go all the way towards the back, because that's where the windows are and it's less populated, less loud, etc. And then walk over, get your food, and go back. So it's kind of nice to spend it there. Dinner was always at the same time for your particular table, in the same table with the same people, same group of servers, let's say. There's a main server and assistants, and it was always really good. The menu is pretty much set, but you can choose between a few items on the menu. I think every night there was availability for a steak, sometimes lobster, etc. So the food is really satisfactory in that regard, I think, by anybody's standards. It's not like some of those all-inclusive resorts that really skimp on the food. They make it look pretty, but it doesn't taste like much. Food was really good. And all throughout the ship you have opportunities to eat and grab a snack. And there's an Italian place, there's a Japanese place, teppanyaki, there's pizza, there's whatever you want you can find. I think on the deck there's a Mexican place with quesadillas and stuff. So drinks, on the other hand, you can opt to have prepaid drinks, but that ends up being kind of expensive unless you're constantly drinking, which I'm not, so I can't comment on that. But you get a cup, and the cup has a code, and you approximate your code to the machine, and it dispenses the drink, etc. So bars are plentiful. There's too many to list, and there's plenty of opportunities to actually make use of those drink packages that you might have purchased. But again, if you're not drinking, 10 drinks a day, or if you don't want to be drinking that much, then it's probably not in your interest to buy that package. Just pay for the individual drinks and you'll be all set. So that would be my suggestion. And I think it's a good way to actually not be gluttonous on a trip, to deny yourself those little things and just have a healthy little excursion. And speaking of excursions, I honestly wouldn't recommend any of them. I mean, they're all different. When we went, just in virtue of the COVID restrictions, when it spread, our itinerary changed. But for example, the excursion to the Blue Lagoon in the Bahamas, kind of a joke in the sense that, for one, you spend a ton of time exiting the ship because everybody's exiting the ship, and then you have to take another ferry boat
I forget how long, 45 minutes to this Blue Lagoon. The food was terrible at the Blue Lagoon, just terrible, greasy, unhealthy food. It's fairly expensive for an excursion for what it is. And then you get off the boat and the beaches, I mean, you could barely dip yourself to your waist until they call you back. So it's very curated. You don't have a lot of freedom to move around. If you're afraid of the open water, I'm gonna scare you even more. I just heard in the news about 2 weeks ago, October 2022, a woman got eaten by a shark there, so she actually died. It's not very common in the Bahamas. She was obviously a customer, a client of one of these Royal Caribbean cruises. So there's that as well. I'm not too worried about that. It's very, very rare. But the beaches were whatever, and they didn't really let us enjoy them the way we wanted to. And it's so quick that you're in, you dip your feet, and then you got to go back again. Then you're sitting on a little ferry boat, and it's windy, and it could be cold and loud and that kind of thing. So the other tour that was taken it was a bus tour basically in Dominican Republic where we stopped. Not exciting at all. I would highly recommend you just enjoy the empty boat while you can. And another reason why I wouldn't take this cruise again is just because of the amount of people that are on here. So if you're considering the fact that we were on a ship that was 50% full, I can't even imagine what this might all be like when it's, back in operating normally, let's say. It just would be too many people in one spot. I don't think I would enjoy it at all. If you're an active individual, there are so many opportunities to take advantage on the ship. I was practically never in my room except to sleep. For one, there's an amazing gym on the top floor, Vitality Gym next to the spa. And it's in the front of the ship. It's got a beautiful view. If you're on a treadmill, you just want to look to the front. It's just incredible. There's also plenty of dumbbells in multiple iterations of each weight between 5 pounds each. So if you're just into that kind of free weight sessions, you can have a great one up there. And then also there is a dedicated room for spinning, but I believe you have to pay and reserve that in advance. And aside from all of that, there are so many machines and big balls and jump ropes and a space for an instructor in private classes. Really, really cool. And in front of the ship, there's also a deck for, I think, the fancy suites. Those guests can have private sessions as well. So the gym was just an awesome asset that I used regularly, multiple times a day sometimes. I just loved being up there. I remember once when it was raining and just being on a treadmill looking at the rain in front of the ship. It was just beautiful, seeing the storms to the sides. Really, really beautiful thing. And then on the top deck as well, below that, at the flex deck, I believe that's towards the rear, is a big court surrounded by stools and bars where if there's a game showing, people can watch the game. But the flex deck itself is dedicated to different sports. So at the time there was indoor soccer, there was basketball, paddleball, that kind of thing, table tennis, and they bring all the stuff out, and then there's a dedicated space of time where this takes place. The problem is that there's always a wait, and sometimes they mix kids with the teenagers and the teenagers with the adults, so you never really have a good workout in that regard. If you're playing soccer or something, I never really enjoyed playing it there because it just wasn't the right mix of age groups, in my opinion. And then also, I can't imagine what this is like when the ship is at full capacity. On the sides of that, on the actual deck itself, there's some little sports things there, and you can run. The deck is used to run around the whole ship. It's marked. I don't recall how many laps is a mile, but it's written there, so you can have a nice jog if that's your thing. It's open, so it's in the open air in that regard. So I do appreciate that. Not everybody respects that that's a dedicated running track, so they get in the way. But so you can really keep busy. For teenagers, there's all these opportunities to take advantage of all those sports and the gym and run around. And I think there's a dedicated teenage zone where adults can't even enter. So I think if you have an older child, they're going to be very busy. I think it's going to be hard to keep track of them, because if they're anything like me, they're going to be all over the ship all the time. Which brings me to my next point, the point of safety. This is an interesting thing to consider because cruise ships operate under the flag of the country they are registered in this case, never the United States. They operate, in the case of Royal Caribbean, I believe it's Nassau, Bahamas. So those are the country's laws that are in effect, so to speak, once the ships are 12 miles off of the maritime border or land, basically 12 miles from the shore of any country. They operate in this international maritime law, or the law of the country that they are registered in. So there are interesting things to consider when it comes to safety of passengers on board. I don't want to get into that. That's a whole other conversation. I would suggest that you take a look at the video made by Hassan Minhaj, I think is his last name, of the very popular show. It's on YouTube, called The Patriot Act, and he talks about cruises. If you already booked your cruise, it's still a great thing to watch, even though it might dissuade you or take some of the excitement away with all the factoids that are thrown out there. It is something to consider, and it's one factor that my wife never got really over. She never really quite felt safe on the open water. I'm Pisces. I'm all about the water, and I don't mind being in the open ocean, even under the moonlight. But if you're not someone who enjoys the open water in that regard, it's hard to relax, especially knowing that, I don't know, the security on the boat. I mean, there's certainly security available. We've never had to use it, and I only saw one fight basically break out between drunks one night at New Year's Eve, but all of that was handled. But I assume if you're already booking this trip, or you're considering, or you already booked it, that you looked into this. If you haven't, just do, because if you have teenage sons and daughters, this might be something you want to pay special attention to, because the kids run around and they have these nightclub nights for the teenagers and whatnot. So, and there's all kinds of people on that boat. So, just something to consider. I'll leave you at that. What else? For the adults in particular, there's also the Solarium. The Solarium is a adult-only bar and jacuzzi / solarium, basically, where you can just stand under the windows. It's enclosed, but it's open because it's all in windows. It's towards the front of the boat and of the ship, and it's quite beautiful. It's open till very late, and you can go, just make sure you go down, and then to the sides there are terraces that can see both the front and the side of the ship, so it's easily missed, but it's quite a view. So that's a great place to spend some time if you're over 18, because there's also, I believe it's 18, don't quote me on that, there's a dedicated bar there as well, and children are not allowed, so if the noise bothers you, that kind of thing. Also because the pools get really, really busy and occupied. So it's now October 2022. It's been 10 months since we returned from our voyage, and meditating on that trip, I wanted to end this video by sharing ultimately would I do it again and what the experience was. I think if you've booked your tour and you've done your research and you're satisfied, skip this part, because it's probably not going to be uplifting. But if you still want to hear all the negatives as well, then here we go. There is the whole factor of the very abusive way in which companies that operate these cruise ships basically operate, especially towards their workers. You'll notice a lot of the workforce is from Southeast Asia. I think the majority for Royal Caribbean are from the Philippines, and a lot of them from Eastern Europe too. I only know this because I can hear the languages, and I'm very sociable, so I approach, and there were a lot of compatriots from Montenegro. I'm from Montenegro, a small country in the Balkans, and I got some insider information to how their experience is as workers, and it hasn't been very uplifting or positive in that regard. The conversations always led to the fact that, for example, the rooms are tiny, the pay is horrible by even Eastern European standards. The internet is super expensive to the workers. The COVID restrictions, all of that kind of thing that makes them not like their job, so to speak, and they're working a lot. They're working a lot of hours, always having to smile. And then you have the whole factor of different cultures working together that maybe haven't had time to learn each other's ways. So if your supervisor is from a totally different culture where you're very unfamiliar with that way of doing things or talking to people or etc., there can be clashes there. This is something that I learned just from talking to these folks. You could also notice something very interesting at dinner, for example, or wherever we were with the child. They would give her so much attention. These mostly men who work in the dining halls and whatnot, and it would be not inappropriate by any means, but it would be just so long and so much attention provided to this little child. You can tell that these folks have been away from their families for months, many months. My father was a sailor. I would not see him for sometimes a year at a time. It's no way to raise a child. And a lot of the kids from my neighborhood in Montenegro at that generation were also not raised by a father, because most of the men went to the ships. If you listen to my mother, she would ban all sailors from having families, or all people with families from sailing. So it's just not, and you can tell these folks are away from their kids, and they're almost like on the verge of tears when they interact with the child. So it's kind of, that was the thing that made me want to inquire more about this. So if you want to learn about your footprint, environmental, finance, whatever, then just take a look at this video by Hassan, I forget his name or last name, from that show, the Patriot Act, and he talks about this, especially about the environmental footprint. For example, how, let's say, the fleet of Royal Caribbean alone causes more CO2 emissions around the Mediterranean than all the cars in the in Europe. So I can't back any of this, but I'm pretty sure that's probably not far from the truth, just in virtue of how much effort it takes to move this ship across the ocean. So there's that factor as well. Something you consider. Would I take it again? Probably not for a long time. I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was a great experience, but my wife didn't. She never felt quite relaxed, quite all that safe, let's say. We never had a bad experience, but being on the open ocean, it's not for everybody. And then there's the whole maritime law issue that you probably should consider, might consider more if you're a younger person or a woman, etc. So there are all those factors to think about. I think until these conditions improve, especially for the workers, then almost out of principle, it would be something that I wouldn't want to replicate. But I do have to say I did have a good time on the ship. Now, we all got COVID. Everybody, we went as a family, and all 5 of us plus the baby tested positive for COVID when we returned. That's another factor to consider. I think all that's kind of coming to an end, and I'm not sure what the COVID restrictions are now, but for 2023 and onward, we actually skipped the New Year's festivities that particular evening because we didn't want to be among so many people. We went to sleep after dinner, and then we started to feel bad the next day when we were already disembarking, and throat, and mostly asymptomatic aside from the throat. The baby had high fever for a day, so not a horrendous experience, knock on wood. But I would say it is interesting that literally all of us in our group caught COVID despite very, very adamant precautions, and you have to be vaccinated, you have to take a test. Everybody does. All the adults have to take a test. The workers take a test before climbing on the boat. All the tours are actually very curated, etc. So it's still spread like wildfire, basically, on the ship. So something also to consider if you're immunocompromised, or if that's something that worries you, then there's a high chance that these kinds of things spread quicker on the boat. Despite the best efforts, even the buttons in the elevator that open doors, etc., none of them are actually touch buttons. They're all proximity buttons. So, I don't know. Very, very, very interesting experience in that regard.
So here we are, morning of departure, Fort Lauderdale, beautiful day. Plenty of other cruisers on the dock, so it'll be a busy day, and certainly is busy for everybody on the ship, especially they're preparing it for the new group of people coming in by noon. So there's a few things you can do to make this day more efficient and pleasant. Basically, go the night before to the customer service desk and make sure you settle any bills, any contestations that you might have of charges, because once you leave the ship, that's it. There's going to be no more opportunities for that. Also, ask for a late checkout for your bags, basically on the bag tags that you leave the night before outside your room. You can ask for them to be at the latest checkout possible, which for this ship is 9:15. If you don't do that, you're going to get assigned something, and it could be early in the morning that completely derails your morning routine. The last thing you want to do is derail your morning routine before a big flight home. So make sure you ask for the latest checkout possible. They'll be happy to give it to you when you ask for it, you know, ahead of everybody. But go the night before at least, because lines tend to form the morning of. The same goes for pictures. If you want to print some photos out, do that the night before. You don't want to be doing that last minute. There it is. Thank you for watching. I hope this review has been helpful to you. If you do this for your checkout day, you're going to have some time to meditate, to walk around the deck while everybody's rushing around you. You're going to be able to leave the ship in a peaceful and relaxing manner and start the day off right and your voyage home, which is, of course, the best part of any trip, going home. I have two little pit bulls waiting for me, and I'm just ecstatic to see them. So thank you again for watching. I appreciate your time. I hope this review has been helpful. Please participate in the conversation in the comment section below, because I learned so much from you. This has been my first big cruise, so I always learn from my community, and I appreciate your participation. Stay safe, all the best in 2022, and see you on the high seas. Till next time, Nick, I'm out.